Mermaid story time, gang. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And on today's channel, well, on today's video, we are going to be reading a story from this channel called Slezor. I just heard it today and I absolutely love the story, and I immediately was like, I've got to put this on the channel, all right? And it's a mermaid story. So let me know what you think about it. I heard it, I just liked listening to it. I don't know how true this is, but I think it was a pretty entertaining story nevertheless. So I'm going to read it to you guys. So as I always do, I'm going to give love to where this original story was heard. So this story was heard on this dude's channel on YouTube. I think you pronounce it Slezor or Slezor. British guy. Whoop whoop, big up my fellow Brits. And if you love anything that is weird, wonderful, paranormal, head over there, hit the like, hit the subscribe button, because he grinds out these videos. Absolutely great, good storytelling. Go over there, show your dude some love, all right? I have to do that because this story was submitted to him, all right? It wasn't submitted to me, but I'm going to read it on my channel because it fits into my aquatic water-coded life and what my channel is a lot about. But I don't want to put his video on there because, well, it's not fair, is it? So I'm going to be rereading it in my own voice. But if you want to watch his videos, please go over and show him some love, because I did get this video from his channel. Somebody wrote into him. They wrote this story for him to into his channel to read. So that must be acknowledged, all right? But in today's video, I'm going to be doing this as a voiceover because it is kind of long and it's really annoying having to keep looking down at the paper, looking down at what I'm reading, as well as trying to do the video navigation, all right? Because I'm not feeling that well today, but I really wanted to do the story. So settle down, get your snack, get a drink, get whatever it is. It's 35 degrees in the UK today, so we are hot, 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 as you can see, and settle in to this story about Paul, a submarine pilot who was hired by a very, very wealthy person and their friends in order to take them down into coordinates in the Atlantic Ocean that he had no idea what it was about because he wasn't being told, only to have one of the most frightening experiences of his life that to this day people just do not believe. Let's go.
So the wealthy truly do have a good life, don't they? They can afford anything, and they think they can throw money at anything and that they will get it, because usually they do. It seemed to be another one of those situations where money can be thrown and anything can be given. But thank God, in this situation, Paul, who is the main character and OP who sent in this story, stood his ground and refused to let any amount of money be the leading decider in what could have potentially turned out to be a life or death situation. I'll be tempted to take the money, but in this situation, I wouldn't even have been there. So let's settle into the story. I hope you've got your snacks. So this story, as I said, was submitted to Slezor's channel by a guy who decided to call himself Paul. Now, Paul here had been a submarine pilot or submarine captain, however you want to put it, for the best part of a decade. He knew his stuff. Let's take our little time submarine back to 2014, 13 years ago now. For his job, he spent a large chunk of his time ferrying around the wealthy. He used to go on yachts, and often he would have wealthy clients. They would actually bring on their own mini submarines that they had. Yes, and I say mini submarines, probably like submersibles, all right, jet skis or smaller boats that the yacht ended up towing. He obviously would get hired and would have to go because he was trained in maneuvering and piloting said submersibles. So the people on board these ships that he used to work for were incredibly wealthy. Think, is it below deck and that type of super yacht lifestyle? They don't know how to do these things. They just want to party and have a good time. And he was there to ensure that his part of the bargain was upheld. So on this particular expedition, he was hired by an incredibly wealthy family. The job was predicted to have lasted for about 2 weeks, 1 week to 2 weeks, all right, where they were going to be coasting around on the yacht around the Florida coast, doing the activities that they wanted to do. However, it ended up taking them considerably longer, because the first thing that he realized when getting onto the yacht was that the people that had hired and chartered him, they didn't seem to want to be there to have fun or party, all right? Most people on the yachts, when he was working on them, they would actually want to be out here drinking, boozing, plush dinners, friends, all of that type of jazz, music playing, just having a great time, kind of. And these guys would just be working around them, ensuring that everything went smoothly and they gave them everything they wanted. But when he got on board this yacht, he realized that this was a completely different vibe. The clients were calm. The family were there, and a few friends. And everybody was just like so low energy. It's like they weren't even getting ready to enjoy themselves or party on the boat. It was like that there was a specific purpose that they had in mind, like a kind of a mission they wanted to go on. But nobody was talking about it. Nobody was saying anything. So on board this ship there we had the main guy who had hired him, his wife, I think their child, and 3 friends. And the energy that was happening was giving Paul like the heebie-jeebies. The first issue he ran into was that this particular yacht had a particular submersible submarine. It was a small-sized civilian submarine, and those were the easiest for him to drive because the controls were just all around easier. It wasn't as complex, and overall, it was the type of submarine that he was actively trained in. So he knew what he was doing. Usually, Paul worked with the same people every single time, but he didn't know these clients. He'd never worked with them before. They were new. He had never seen their yacht in Florida. He had never seen their submarine, and he had never seen them. Now, given that there are, the super wealthy don't come in droves, it's a small kind of like pool when you're working in this field. Everybody sort of knows everybody, and he didn't know these people. But he said to himself that isn't necessarily a bad thing. So on the first night, he sat down with them for a bit, getting to know them. He was invited to dinner, and they sat down at this long stretching table. The yacht was hundreds and hundreds of feet. It was absolutely massive, so the dining room was absolutely gorgeous. And to be fair, he was actually pretty intimidated. Like, these are really powerful people, and he was trying to relate to them at this dinner table, but he couldn't. He just couldn't. He was simply, at the end of the day, just there to control the submarine. That was his job, and he was okay with that. He actually wanted, though, to make sure that the clients got what they wanted when they're paying this much money. And he, as a submarine captain, was a professional, and he wanted to ensure that they are going to have a good time, all right? So he was just simply waiting for everybody to finish dinner. It was a common courtesy to wait for everybody to kind of put their knives and forks together and everybody's finished their last bite before he decided to go in and start asking, okay, what is it exactly that you want out of this trip? But when he asked that question, rather than being met with exuberant replies, everybody that was at that dinner table, including the son, went quiet. Nobody said a word. The son, to be fair, didn't even seem to know what was going on. Or the guy who Paul assumes was in charge of the family and in charge of the yacht ends up looking to him and saying, I know where I want to go. And Paul's like, okay, great, good stuff. Where? The answer the guy gives him is odd. He gives him an exact location based on some kind of coordinate system which they use on the sea. And he thinks, okay, well, I have to go and, kind of look up where this exactly is because I don't know. But the guy wouldn't say anything else. Even when Paul was looking at him, waiting for him to give him more information, everybody was silent and the guy said nothing else. And he looked at the guy and said, so whereabouts in the Atlantic are you looking to submerge this submarine? Is there a goal in mind? Do you want to see certain fish, certain wildlife, marine life? And this guy answered none of those questions. Not one. He didn't. Paul would only find out about the mermaid thing and the really unusual plans once they were in the submarine and under the ocean. The worst situation possible. But let's backtrack. He initially thought, all right, they just want to use the submarine and see what it's like. We're going to go down for like half an hour, maybe 20 minutes. And, we're going to go around and we're going to see and feel how cool it is and maybe catch a few fish here or there. You know what I mean? Just kind of look around. And so he was okay with doing that. But that was the idea in his mind, what they wanted. But my God, was he wrong. He was wrong. So fast forward. So they were actively incredibly far out from America at this point. They were far off in the Atlantic Ocean. Okay, they were far off from the coast of the States, and they'd actually been going for a few days now, and it was time to launch the submarine. So finally he tells the owner of the yacht that he's preparing, as he has now seen the location that the owner gave him. He saw the coordinates, he's found them, and now he's ready to go. Guys, it was the middle of nowhere. There were no wildlife areas here. There were no coves. There were no specific areas in that part that he had pinpointed that Paul could have even have thought like, oh yeah, that's a great place for taking a submarine down. It was brass, bare, nothing. All right. Usually Paul is used to going down under the, looking at caves. There will be on coral reefs, just amazing places, something actively to see. But the coordinates that he was given was in the middle of essentially nowhere. Personally, I really wouldn't have gone, but money talks. So the place that the owner had asked him to go was essentially some coordinates in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. And the strangest part of all was Paul kept on thinking, how did you actually come up with this location? Like, why do you want to go here? Why? There's the captain of the yacht. Now, obviously, they have skippers and they have crew hands on these yachts, all right? They've got the whole crew because they have people that are like at their beck and call. That's how big it is. And Paul works with them, but he doesn't know what their work is. They all do their individual things and they just get on with it. He's simply there to just wait until the time comes to do the submarine job that he's required to do, and that's that. But he can still talk to these people, all right? And he was confused as hell. And every single one of these crew members, as he would walk down the corridor, for example, he would wanted to ask, what in the world, did they know what was going on here? He bumped into one of the cleaners. He kind of catches her, he kind of gets her attention. He's like, do you know where they want to go? Like, what is the purpose of this damn trip? And she just kind of looks at him, smiles, and goes, yeah, the captain is kind of confused on this one as well, And Paul is like, I'm confused. It's like making no sense. Like, he wants to now obviously talk with the captain. But the annoying thing is, the yacht owner seems to want to be involved in every single aspect of this trip. He is hands-on, which is for once annoying. He is up there on the deck. He is by the captain. He wants to be involved in all aspects of this trip for whatever reason, meaning that Paul has no time to get the captain alone to have a chin wag and say, like, what's the deal here? He has not one chance without the owner knowing that he's trying to pry. This pressure, this weight would all fall onto Paul because he realized that everything about this trip seemed to be focused on getting in that submersible at those locations to see God knows whatever they wanted to see. And that felt dreadful. They wanted something down there and he would only find out once it had gone down. So it finally was submersible day. They made it to the coordinates that were given, and the yacht is pretty much static now. It's not moving. And the owner all of a sudden gets really happy. Not only him, but everybody on board that cruise ship. The yacht is now in a position where they feel as if something's going to happen. It feels like whatever they came here to do was here. And suddenly, now they're in a party mood. The music comes on and they start partying. Paul cannot help but think this is not good. This is strange. No one is allowed to drink before they get in a submarine. He was strict on that. So why on earth is this happening? Safety is paramount. So he takes the owner aside and has a conversation with him. And he says, again, what is your goal? What do you want me to do? And the owner was acting as if he was hiding something. He was hiding his true intentions. Paul knew that for sure. He did not want to say what he wanted to see on that submarine. Paul asked him again, do you want to go round at a certain level, at a certain depth of the ocean for like half an hour? I can take you to see, certain wildlife, certain fishes. And this whole time, the owner was just nodding, all right, nodding. But Paul could see in his eyes that he was just playing along. In the end, though, it's Paul, the owner, and the owner's wife, and their 3 friends. No one else is going down. Just this lot. And as they get into the submersible, they start descending. They've only been going down for about 10 minutes. And this is when the owner changes. His entire vibe, his entire personality, all of a sudden, he comes to life. Let's go forward. And Paul's thinking, yeah, we were planning on going forward, all right? Like, why would you tell me to do that? I'm the submarine captain. And Paul started to almost get annoyed with this guy, all right? Because he didn't like being told what to do. This guy didn't know how to control the submarine. Paul did. This was his job, and he felt like he was just encroaching. Why did he decide he wanted to come alive now? Suddenly he has a voice, and now he wants to start speaking. Paul was not about this, and he knew from the beginning that this was a trip that he knew felt suspicious, and it just felt awful at this point. But what could he do? So Paul was now trying to keep him happy, but the guy was saying to go far away from the yacht. And they had communications that go to a certain level. All right, he wanted to keep going far away from the yacht, which Paul knew was a bad idea because they had to make sure that they were able to communicate back with the yacht. And you could only go so far from the yacht before communication started to cut out. There was a certain level under the ocean that he could go safely without compromising communication, shutting down altogether. And Paul didn't want to go too far because he didn't want to lose communication, clearly. So it got to the point where everybody on that submarine except Paul wanted to go further out. And Paul made an agreement with them that he would go a certain distance, that he won't go any further than that for the safety of everybody. Clearly the owner got a bit annoyed, but he did quiet down and they went out to the location. It was very deep and a long way from the yacht, and as they're going down into the ocean, deeper and deeper, Paul is seeing what he expects to see. He's trained to see this. He has a decade of experience. He sees a couple of fish, which you would expect to see at that depth of ocean. And as they get lower, though, he starts to realize something really strange, because the ocean floor was way further down. Like, they could not get that low with this type of submersible, let's just be clear. But the problem was that he could see something that looked just like the ocean floor. And all the sensors and the things on his submarine and the control panel and all of the screens in front of him with his control sticks and everything was telling him that the floor was right there. The ocean floor was right there. He knew that couldn't be the case. And he's thinking to himself, we are in the Atlantic Ocean. He knows how deep the bottom of the ocean is in this area, roughly. And he's thinking, this is not right. This is about a quarter of the distance down that it should be. And he's getting really confused. He's looking at the system. Don't forget, this is a brand new submarine, guys. It is a civilian submarine, so it's not like a military one, but it's still expensive. It's worth millions. And this guy who is trained to do this is looking at the screen and thinking, how on earth is a submarine this new just glitching? How is something wrong? Because how is it that the screen and the sensors are telling me that the floor of the ocean is right here? Because it's picking something up. But as he started to get low and realized his sensor started beeping, he was thinking, yeah, bro, this is dangerous, He's like, I don't really want to do this anymore. And he immediately turns off to the side to almost position the submersible to the point where he can look down and direct the lights to where it's beeping at him and saying the bottom of the ocean is, because it shouldn't be there. All right. And as he goes and curves around, he immediately tips the submarine forward, all right, so that he could turn the light on so that it could beam straight down to see what was going on, only for it to reveal what looked like mounds, huge mounds, kind of like a hill that had all of these tunnels dug into it. And he was really confused because this wasn't a boat that had sunk. He thought it was one of these submarines. He thought this was one of these sunken ships or something like that. But no. It wasn't a subboat. It wasn't a unit that had sunk or a shipping container that had fallen off cargo. It was actual like Earth. like some kind of clay or some kind of material that was natural, organic. And he was looking at this thing shining the light. And he wasn't paying any attention to the people in the submarine at this moment because he genuinely was confused as to what he was looking at. And he's going around it, shining the light, and it's all these big kind of tunnels and gaps in between this mound. And he's looking at this thing thinking, what the frick is this? He had never seen anything like this in the 10 years that he had been captain of submarines. Paul had been looking at this thing for about 40, maybe 50 seconds. It stretched for hundreds of meters. It stretched further than the light on his submersible could see. And at this point, he's not talked to the owner that is sat right next to him. He's lost for words, and at that moment, he thinks they are too. But what the owner says next leaves Paul utterly speechless. Paul is still looking at this thing, trying to figure out what on earth he is looking at. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't look like anything that humans have made that's been dropped in the ocean or something. It looks totally natural, like the formation of everything. It looked like caves made of mud or like some kind of clay. And he was just looking at this, and the owner just kind of nudges him on the shoulder and just says, "Go inside that one." I'm like, bitch, what? This is me, sorry. And he said it with such confidence, as if he had been inside them before. This was the direction that the owner told Paul to head in. And now he was telling Paul to go inside one of these tunnels. Paul just immediately turns to him and he goes, "Look, I can't do this. We can't go inside there. I don't know where that goes, and I'm not trained to go into things like that. You know? I'm sorry, we can go around it the other side, but I'm not going in." The owner got really angry with him and was like, "No, go in, it's fine. Go through it." And Paul's just like, "Look, sir, I am not going to do that. I am sorry." The owner starts full on arguing, saying, "I paid this much money," and because he knows that, that Paul is obviously highly trained and it's a lot of money to employ him to control one of these submarines that he owns, going on and on. The owner clearly just obviously wasn't happy. But they came to an agreement. Eventually, after 2 or 3 minutes of literally just floating in the same spot with the lights directed at these huge man-made mound-looking these tunnels, where did they go? They weren't at the bottom of the ocean, clearly. Paul, using his logic, thought, well, they will just come out the other end of this tunnel into the ocean, right? So he did what the owner asked after that, which was the agreement they made, that he wouldn't go into the tunnel, instead he would go around it. He figured that if he came up a little bit and turned the full beam lights off and went over the top, it would be okay. But he soon realized that there was no other side. He had been going for 10 minutes. There was no other side. And this is the point where he had almost breached the distance limit that he wanted to go from the yacht without, severely compromising communication from the yacht. And it was dangerous, all right? But the owner told him that they were almost there. And Paul, thinking in his mind, how do you know we're almost there? Where is almost there, right? But the owner just kept saying, keep going. It's just there. It's another few minutes. Keep maintaining this speed. Maintain this steady speed and we'll get to the other side. It drops down, and Paul could not believe that this owner was acting like he knows where he was going. They were so far under the Atlantic Ocean. How? He acted like he already knew his way around these tunnels. But eventually, 3 minutes later, Paul directs the submersible into the lower part of the ocean, as he soon realizes that his sensor on the screen is telling him that the bottom of the ocean or the earth below him is now not there. He used that as a marking point to turn it around and point the nose down, full beam light back on. And when he does that, he sees a massive drop deeper down to the ocean. But right in front, where he's gone a bit too far over, is the exact same thing that they saw on the other side. The tunnels. These mud tunnels. He's looking at this material and thinking, how is it keeping its form under the ocean? It couldn't have been mud. It wasn't making any sense, because it would surely just fall apart. Come apart from the ocean and just drift. So the material of this was different. He couldn't figure out if it was some kind of stone or limestone or whatever, but it was holding its form. And it was the same thing on the other side with these tunnels. So Paul had already done what the owner asked him to do. That's it. They'd already gone further out than he actually wanted to go, and his boundary was set. It's just a bunch of tunnels on this side, a bunch of networks in this huge kind of clay mound. Nothing really exciting is happening. So they're looking at these entrances, and the owner was continually saying, let's just go in, let's just go in. And Paul was like, bruh. Okay, he didn't say bruh. He's obviously saying, no, not going in. And the owner just says, if we could just go up to the entrance and simply just shine the lights in, then we can go back to the yacht and I'm happy. Thanks for what you've done. I'll be dead set. And Paul's like, okay, that seems reasonable. At least he's not going to keep wanting to go in. So he starts to lower the submersible craft right to the first highest tunnel entrance. He doesn't want to go too low, and he's definitely not going in. And he comes slowly towards it with his submersible and directs it so that the nose is no longer tipped downwards with the full beam light on. He brings it more level, and as he descends and approaches this tunnel, the lights illuminate all of the dark spaces in between, and they kind of reveal that this really fast-stretching tunnel, and inside it, it's all the same material, and they're going down, and eventually they get level with the tunnel. And the owner undoes his seatbelt and leans forward, and he looks right up to the big window glass like he's almost looking for something, thinking there was going to be some sort of treasure there. He knew what he was looking for. And Paul's just kind of looking at this guy, and he's turning around looking at the friends and the friends' wives and the guy's friends, and they're not really interested at all, but the owner is. Paul just says to him, sir, please can you sit back in the seat and put your safety seatbelt back on? The owner just ignores him and simply tells him to turn the power of the lights back up. And Paul is like, you can't go up any more than this. It's already at maximum, or so he thought. But the owner goes from leaning against the glass window and kind of looking in for something, stepping back, not going back to his seat, but moving over and kind of leaning or reaching over to Paul where the controls are for the lights. Paul immediately goes, sir, what are you doing? And Paul is in this awkward situation because he's the captain of the submarine. He's the one that should be maneuvering it, but the guy is also the owner of the submarine, so it is technically his submarine. But the guy leans over, and as he reaches for the light, he turns it. And sure enough, as he presses and turns it a little bit more, sure enough, it made the lights more powerful. Not double as powerful, but about 20% more powerful. And that revealed something that once Paul had gone from looking at the owner, reaching over, thinking, what is he doing? How is he turning those lights up? To looking back into the tunnel. He sees something that he cannot believe. He sees a lady. What he can describe as a lady. Long hair, but the skin of this lady was shiny. It was silver, and there were all these gills around her cheeks. All of these gills like fish have, and this lady was further down in the tunnel, but because the owner had turned the lights on enough, it was now illuminating the lady, who was shining, this humanoid mermaid lady that was in this tunnel. And Paul had never seen anything like it in his life. But the creepiest part of all was the reaction from the owner and his friends and his wife. Suddenly they were interested and they moved forward. They all took their safety belts off, which was a nightmare for Paul. He didn't know whether to freak out over them taking their seat belts off and moving to the front of this submersible to look out, or whether to freak out because of what they were actively looking at. And what he could only describe as a mermaid. A lady, a humanoid lady with kind of silver, shiny skin with gills right around her cheeks that were flapping open, small, very small, like petals of a flower, about 20 on each side. And he's looking and he's thinking, this is nuts. There wasn't a scuba diver. There was no oxygen tank. There was no diving suit. Nothing. This was something that he had never seen before, and he's looking right at it. And the owner and his friends and his wife are trying to tell Paul to go closer, and they're trying to wave to it. They're trying to communicate with it as if they'd seen it before. And this was the moment when Paul immediately, just in his bones, felt that they were in danger. He felt that to his core. Something was telling him not to go closer to this mermaid, air quotes, and the owner and the people in the craft were still out of their seats, and Paul just yells at them, get into your seats. Now they're not paying any attention to him. He uses the control without even saying one word to lift the craft right up to the top, and he goes speeding the fastest the craft will go back in the direction of the yacht. And the owner turns around to him and tries to grab the control stick. Paul pushes him off, quite literally asserts his dominance in that cockpit right there as the captain of the submarine, as he should. The owner was angry, guys. He refused to go further into that tunnel to try to talk and communicate, or to be closer to that lady silver mermaid thing. He never spoke to Paul all the way back. They get back, they attach the submersible marine to the back of the yacht using the bar and unhook the connector or whatever it's called, and they all get out of the submersible craft. The crew are waiting to help them out, and when the owner gets out, he storms off. Even the friends at this point were angry at Paul for not going further in and communicating with this mermaid. He gets off the submersible, climbs out of the seat as the driver, and goes over to the cabin, locks the door and just sits there. He had no idea at what he saw and was trying to process everything. He was shaking. He sat there for hours, alright, elbows on knees, head in hands, just contemplating what it was that he saw, shaking. He didn't realise that the owner was now trying to convince the yacht crew members, the captain of the yacht, to go down and operate the submersible. They didn't even know how to do it, and he was trying to convince them. Everything in his power he was doing to convince them to go down. You can imagine, alright, anything that a wealthy person would be trying to do to get to convince somebody to do something. He was telling people, I'm going to retire you for life. You know, I'm not going to just retire you. You're going to have an amazing retirement. I'm going to give you that much money, alright, if you do this. Thankfully, the yacht captain stayed strong and he didn't fall into any of the temptations. He didn't get into that submarine. Alright, and it got to a point where they were actually scared that the owner was going to go down himself and try to pilot it himself. But he didn't know how to operate it, and he wasn't that dumb, alright? He wasn't that dumb. He knew it took years of training, and he wasn't crazy enough to go and to try to do that. But that was that. The holiday was done. Even though they were supposed to be out there for 2 weeks, the owner instructed the yacht captain to just head directly back to Florida. It took them days and days to get back there, but he instructed them just to head back. It was the end, alright? They didn't want to do any more of that holiday. Paul didn't come out of the cabin for very much, other than to just eat his meals and to simply go up on deck to get some fresh air and walk about, and he made sure he stayed well clear of the owner, as he knew that there was beef between them and the tension was brewing. But he was still needing to process what he saw, and still to this day, whenever he speaks to the people, his colleagues, nobody actually believes what he said they saw down there. No one. And that's just something that he now has to live with. So that was Paul's submission about the day that wealthy yacht owners hired him to take a submersible down to see mermaids.